thus the illustration on our video today. But more than that, not just building the networks, not just making the decision to get out, but then there is action. You've got to begin walking away from those things which was leading you into that corner, leading you into that decision-making process. For example, I'll have soldiers at times who would come and sit in my office and say, Chaplain, I have my life is coming apart, and I've got issues with relationship, and I've got issues with money, and I've got all these issues. And then I say, okay, well, help me understand your life. Well, I've been married 6 months, and we went out and we just bought 2 vehicles. Well, how much are the vehicles? Well, each one of them is about $50,000 a piece. And you're an E4? How did you qualify for that? You know, I can't make the bills. Well, understandably, you can't make the bills. Okay? But that's not just a young soldier issue. That's an issue with all of us because we mismanage the funds and we get pushed into those corners. The way you get away from that is you stop the behavior. You stop the spending. You stop those things which keep feeding that depression. And then you go in a new direction. Continuing to do the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is a classic definition for insanity. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you today to walk away from the insanity in your life and find a better way. There are many people out there who are willing, ready, and able to help you do that, including your Garrison Chaplain's office, which I'm a part of. Are there any questions at this point? Any questions, thoughts, ideas? Anybody ever been to a ball game at Fenway? Anybody? Okay. Fenway can seat a little over 37,000 people. In 2010, over 38,000 people completed suicide. More people than could sit in Fenway Park. You can make the difference. Decide to do that today. Thank you.
All right, good morning. My name is Dan Peterson. I do administrative law and ethics. Some of you heard me before. I try and keep it a little bit different. One of the things that comes with my class is that if you ever have any questions or concerns, you can always call me, or you can always ask any questions that you like. If you have a question about your friend, let's suppose that your friend has some ethical issues and your friend wants to talk about that. Glad to talk about your friend's issues. Whatever else you need. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Sometimes people ask me in the world of ethics, what do I do? And I tell people, actually, I am an insurance salesman. And people say, what? I said, I sell insurance. They said, no, you get out of here. You're a lawyer. I said, yeah, but I'm selling insurance. I sell the insurance that if you follow the ethics rules and something goes bad, you're protected. Because if you do something unethical, are you automatically going to get in trouble? Maybe, maybe not. It's like driving a car. You could drive a car without insurance for years sometimes. Maybe you drive it all your life. You'll never have an accident, never have any issues, nothing bad will ever happen to you. But occasionally, you may have an accident or something may go bad. And so that's why I tell people I sell the insurance. If you buy the insurance and you follow the advice, you're always going to be protected. You're always going to be fine. If you don't want to buy the insurance, that's fine. Sometimes bad things may happen. And so that's the idea. And so as you see up here, you kind of receive the safe harbor, the insurance policy. I'm here to help you navigate through things. Ethics came about because of the rules of ethics have been around forever, for a long time. The original ethics rule is in our Constitution, the U.S. Constitution. It's called the Miller Clause, and it says that you may not work for a foreign government and the U.S. government at the same time. So Fast forward many years to the time of Richard Nixon. He had the committee to re-elect the president creep. He did a little thing called Watergate, got involved with that a little bit, and he really got hung up with the cover-up. He kind of had to resign his presidency. That was very disappointing for him, very disappointing for the country, and they established the Office of Government Ethics, among other things. And that was part of the culture change. So we have all kinds of people. The SecDef has talked about that culture and ethics is about what we do now. There's all kinds of military scandals that are going about. Every day I come into work and I listen to the National Public Radio. Typically, that's my radio choice, and they come up with all kinds of different stories. They just had, for example, an admiral who was the commandant at the U.S. Naval Academy, and while he was a commander in the Pacific, he was working with a Filipino businessman, a Malaysian businessman, excuse me, nicknamed Fat Albert, and he was engaged in the practice of steering business to those ports that Albert had a contract with to provide support to naval shipyards. And they just, that admiral got a letter of censure. He got to retire early. They just had a Navy captain who was just convicted of accepting cash. Usually if you're accepting cash and bribes from somebody, like prostitutes, other things like prostitutes, maybe you should have an idea, maybe that's wrong. So we've had that. So it's ongoing all the time. You see it all the time, ongoing. It's in other parts of the government. You see the mayor of New Orleans recently. He got convicted of taking federal money. Nagin, he took, I think, absconded with about $450,000. He got in trouble. So this is not something that's normal. These are the principles of ethical conduct, and they go over the basics of that, and the basic rules are very simple. If you are a taxpayer, would you want your taxpayer money used for this sort of thing? So, put public service above it. No gifts from prohibited sources. Prohibited sources are people that contract with us or want to contract with us. So no gifts from contractors. You have to be careful of that. There's a few exceptions to that, but that's the basic rule. Because if you have a lot of gifts, they begin to look like what? Right, exactly. The B word, bad. Don't use public office for private gain. A lot of people do that. We had a person when I worked at Pope that was selling real estate, and in addition to a regular job. And during her job, she was taking calls about real estate offers and offerings. She was making copies of flyers on the government copier. She was sending out faxes on a government fax. And we suggested perhaps she should go do that full time. And she did. So you don't want to be involved in that sort of situation. You want to be impartial, no preference. The federal government is supposed to, many parts of the world you have to have bribes to get things done. We try hard not to here. So no outside employment or job hiring like conflicts with your government job. Report fraud, waste, and abuse. And protect and conserve government property for authorized purposes. The best property is the worst stuff is other people's stuff. So we'll talk more about that later. Conflicts of interest. These come about of people like Jack Abramoff. Jack Abramoff was a lobbyist in the federal government, and he decided that scotch tastes much better on a Scottish golf course. So Jack Abramoff would take a congressman, fly him out to Scotland, give him dinner, a round of golf at St. Andrews Golf Course, set him up for the night, and of course, he would give him scotch. So after that, about $18,000 later, the congressman says, hey, this is pretty good. He'd vote for almost anything. So Jack Abramoff, he got some time in prison for that. So he was doing bad things on this. Another example was if you have the person who's the poster child for this is Darlene Drunian. Darlene Drunian was the #2 person in acquisitions for the Air Force. She was bidding on a contract between Boeing and Airbus. And at one point, Darlene Drunian talked to she had a daughter. her daughter wanted to get a job as an engineer, fully qualified, and the Boeing people, she approached the people at Boeing and said, you know, I don't know if this is right or not, but you know, my daughter needs a job. They, darling, baby, no problem. Boom, she gets a job. Darling said, that's pretty cool. I like this. And so then, Darlene said, I think I should, maybe I'll see if he can get a job for my daughter's fiance. And she goes up, she mentions to the boy, you know, my daughter has a fiance. Darling, we already had this conversation. No problem. Boom. Fiance gets a job. Darling said, wow, this is really cool. I wonder if I can do this. And so she began talking to the people, and she was going to retire shortly. And she said, how about, can you give me a job? And the Boeing people just smiled and said, of course we can. Come on down. And so they started negotiating with her, and she gave inside information to the Boeing people about the contract bids and everything. And she also was rigging the contract a little bit to favor Boeing. And at one point, it was getting to the point where it was a little hinky, and Senator McCain's office complained about it, and the FBI was like, really? Are you serious? So they go in, they start looking around, they go, look around some more and go, I wonder. They look around some more and say, oh, we got a live one. So they start to investigate, and eventually they take Darlene Drunion doing negotiations for her job, promising things to Boeing in return for a job as a vice president, earning 6 figures. And one of the problems for this, Darlene should have realized that the problem for this was when she was negotiating for this, she was at a small hotel room outside of a regional airport in Florida. So she wasn't at the Boeing headquarters doing this. That should have been a clue to her. Darlene Drunion got to wear an orange jumpsuit for about 9 months after that. So she got convicted, went to jail. Boeing lost the contract. That contract took 8 years for the government to award. It was painful. It was painful. Boeing eventually won the contract again, but it was excruciating. The Air Force went 8 years without a new plane. The CEO of Boeing got fired. The CFO got fired. The 2 vice presidents who were trying to hire her got fired. So it's amazing what you will see. So conflicts of interest come up all the time. You want to be impartial about what you do. If it's a cover relationship, that means that somebody who's doing business with the government or wants to do business with the government. So that's one of those people that are going to be doing that. Identifying them, some of you will have to file an OGE 450 form. That's a financial disclosure form. If you don't have to file that, you don't need to worry about that. If you're a general, you have to file an OGE 278. The OGE 278 can be disclosed through the Freedom of Information Act. The 450 never is. It's totally private. So, some things they have there. The Stock Act means that you have to submit transactions that you have, or do it if you are only a 450 or if you are a 278 filer. So you guys don't need to worry about that. Non-federal entities. Non-federal entities are everybody but us. So non-federal entities like to come on and play with us and do things with us because we provide them support. So everybody, for example, wants to come in here, and the problem that we have is the pony ride problem. If you give a ride to one child at the fair, so you take a pony to the fair and you're giving a child a ride, you come back, and what happens after you give one child a ride? There's more children. There's 3 children now. And then you say, okay, I'll just give 3 children a ride. So you give 3 children a ride, you come back, and what happens? More children. So everybody wants to have a part of the pie. So if you do it for one, you have to be willing to do it for all. And so we're limited on that. So we are very limited on providing that. We're limited on providing support to the use. We're limited to no fundraising with it either using federal money, federal things. So we can accept travel expenses. So if you have a non-federal entity, for example, we have the Special Olympics. We send people out to the Olympic Committee. Somebody, they pay for the travel out, the hotel, the meals, they come back. They train everybody how to do a Special Olympics here on post. That's totally fine. You can do that, but you have to do it ahead of time. You come tell us. So you're not supposed to tell afterwards, and you never accept cash. And that's the other thing is if you ever get a gift, nobody should ever be giving you cash. Cash is bad. So endorsement, other people will always ask for us to endorse things, and everybody always wants our shine. You will always see television commercials, and you'll see people, they're either retired or they're in something that has no rank on it. But we, the military, do not endorse financial or other products. Gifts from prohibited sources. People, contractors, other people, other non-federal entities give us gifts all the time. They want to give you gifts. Now, there's some things you can take, and that's totally fine. For example, if it is a donation or if it's a discount that's available to everybody. So, for example, all members of the federal government and all members of the military can accept a 10% discount from AT&T, Verizon, etc. It's a military discount out there. You can go to Lowe's and you can get a military discount. Now, some of you are going, what? I didn't know about that. It's true. So there's a lot of places that will give you that. You can accept a free meal at Labor Day or Memorial Day, whatever they've got. So that's totally fine if that's available. Another thing would be other gifts. People will try and give you greeting cards. That's totally fine. There's something called the coffee and donut rule. If somebody brings in some coffee and donuts, you can have that. If you're swayed by a chocolate sprinkle donut, we're in big trouble. If you're like Homer Simpson, I'm like going, oh boy, we're in more trouble than I want to know. So those are the type of things you can do. The other exceptions are things that we call the $20, $50 rule. So this amount has not changed for many years now, and Congress needs to make a change on this because inflation has taken over. But the basic rule is that you can accept a meal or some other gratuity from somebody as a gift if it's $20 on a single occasion. So with a total of $50 for the year. So that means that the contractor can buy you lunch on Monday, lunch on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, appetizers only. So you're limited to $50, so whatever's left. So you can also take a gift based on a personal relationship. So for example, you've known Uncle Billy Bob since you were age 2. He happens to own a business. He gives you gifts as your uncle. That's totally fine. You can do it if you go to a speaking engagement. You can accept food, drink as part of the speaking engagement. Widely attended gatherings. Those are something that happen in Washington, D.C., but they usually are after work. You are not in uniform, and you are proceeding to mix and mingle with everybody. You can accept up to $265 with that. You cannot go to something like a golf course and do that. No go. These are ethics plans from the lobbyists, and they talk about that. The same thing goes for lobbyists that goes with us. So lobbyists are banned too. Okay, so here's a good one. You have an organization here. Let's take this little quiz. And they're offering you go to a conference. Now, one thing I'll tell you all is that if you go to a conference, you have to first get approval to go to a conference. Because after everything that happened in Las Vegas, it did not stay in Las Vegas with the Government Service Administration. They had kind of a bad day. You can ask Prince Henry, too. It doesn't stay there. So, here's a trip to Vegas. It's about, stuff that we're going to learn at work. That's totally fine. It's a 2-day conference. So can you go speak? Can you go there? How many think you can go there of course, who turned down a trip to Las Vegas? How many think that the question is absolutely yes? Yeah, that's good, I'm glad you've learned. How about no? No way. How many of you think, maybe? How many of you are alive? So the answer is really maybe. Because it would see how much it is there. So the Army can do it. You can go to a conference and you can do things, but you have to know that it's in the government interest and that's appropriate use of government resources. So it comes back to the whole notion, can we defend this in the newspaper? So can we defend the use of this in the newspaper? Use of government resources. The best kind of stuff is other people's stuff. So here's a general rule for use of government resources. Does it adversely impact on the agency? Is there a reasonable duration? It serves a legitimate purpose? Does it adversely affect on DoD? Creates minimal cost. One of the things you have to be careful of on this is government vehicles. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And you want to look at this and say, is this okay, and does it overall pass the newspaper test? So there's a famous test called the Washington Post test. Would you want this in the Washington Post? So as an example, this is a case that actually happened in the Washington Post. You can actually look this up. This is too weird to be true. So there was a young man. He was forlorn because he's trying to date a cheerleader at his high school. And so he is so forlorn. And he said to his father, "Father, I am forlorn." And the father said, "I know you're forlorn, but just ask somebody out to the dance." He said, "Dad, I don't know how to do this." And Dad said, "Well, just ask her." He said, "Dad, that's not cool. Everybody gives a gift or something with a ticket inside of a gift and give it to them. Well, put inside something like a cake or some cupcakes." "Dad, everybody does that. This is a cheerleader. I need something special." He said, "Well, why don't you put it inside of a bear and give it to her?" "Dad, that was last year. It doesn't work again." And Dad says, I am a pilot for the Department of Homeland Security. I fly helicopters. I know what I'll do for you. I will fly my helicopter to your school. I will land in the courtyard. I will then give you the bear. You will take the bear out and you will give it to the girl. She will open the bear and she will see the ticket and she will go to the dance with you. You want to know something? It worked. It was wonderful. It was just wonderful. It worked beautifully. Now there's a small problem. When you fly a helicopter to a public school and you land in their courtyard, what do all the kids have on them? Cell phones. Yeah, baby. So everyone took pictures of the helicopter and video of the helicopter landing. It went out on Snapchat. It went out on Twitter. It went out on Vine. My kids told me that Facebook is so dead. The teachers put it out on Facebook. It worked out real well. And the problem with this was your supervisor or the big boss should never read about what you do in the newspaper, because the Washington Post picked this up, and that's what happened was the Department of Homeland Security, he's reading his coffee, and he reads about a helicopter landing in the schoolyard and handing out bears. What do you think happened? What do you think happened? Anybody? What? They fired? That's right, they fired him. They fired the Department of Homeland Security helicopter pilot. This was so egregious, they fired him right on the spot. And then they fired the guy who approved it, fired him also, and they were gone. And part of the reason for that was that if that helicopter had had an issue, it had crashed for some reason, what would have happened? You would have put all those students' lives at risk for a lark, for a total lark. So that actually happened, and it's amazing. Now, most of the stuff we see is not quite that extreme, but you gotta watch for that. Can you use the internet? Absolutely. You can go on the internet, but you have to be careful with it, please. No pornography. You say, no. But people use pornography? The answer is, yeah, they do. Don't do that. Don't use that. And you have to be careful about don't overburn the stream, overburn the system, so no streaming. No doing video. The other thing is that you shouldn't be watching that much TV anyway. So if you come in, you're just watching TV, your boss probably needs to have a chat with you about what you're doing. You need something else to do. So Email. Remember that email lives forever now. It's on the enterprise email system, and there's no right to privacy in it. You can ask General Sinclair about that. So General Sinclair wrote lots of email, and that all came back to haunt him. There was also a general who wrote about Congressman Elmers. Congressman Elmers, he said, Congressman Elmers just visited me. She's so hot. And she's, Sinclair writes back, oh, prove it to me. Oh, yeah, we did X, Y, and Z on the desk here. It was really great. And unfortunately, that email there came out, and then Congressman Elmers gets to read the email, and she was not so amused. And neither was the rest of the government. And that general, he got to retire. So his career was over. So those sorts of things do go around. Telephone, have to be careful with that, please. Don't be, you can use it for appropriate purposes, official purposes. Don't be calling people overseas. Commercial activities, you don't get to use it for outside work. We talked about that before. Official purposes, government vehicles are for government time and government purposes. So be careful with your government vehicles, please. I had a case one time with an inspection team. They were bored, and so they went to, they were in a small town outside Mississippi, and they went out, got piled in a van, and went out to a strip club. Government van should never go to strip clubs. That's always bad. So they go to the strip club, and they come out after a couple hours, and somebody had a sense of humor about that, and they took all the tires off the car. So when you're in a government van that has no tires, it can't go anywhere. So they walked back to the base, and then they got to tell that to the commander the next morning. And strangely enough, they were not on the next trip. I don't know what happened to them. So don't take your government vehicles to inappropriate places, gambling, strip clubs. You see that on YouTube videos, everything else now. Also, you should not be taking it, if you're driving around here locally, normally taking it to lunch. If you're out TDY outside the post in your alleyways and you have to make a stop for lunch, that's fine. Stop for lunch. Common sense prevails, and then come back, do your thing. But if you're on post here, you have to be careful what you're doing. If you have questions about it, discuss it with your supervisor. You don't get to take the vehicle home, except in very limited cases. And you have to be careful about taking them to events. They had a bad day there. And there. So email. Lots of people like to use email for a lot of different stuff. Remember that your government email has an official stamp of government purpose on it. So you don't want to use your government email for outside fundraising, for outside purposes. And also you want to be extremely careful with using your government email at any time for any sort of political activities. So we're in an off year right now, but next year the political season is going to get hot and heavy again. Presidential election. Remember, you may not be part of any type of political activity while you're officially on the job. So that's called the Hatch Act, and the remedy for the Hatch Act is we fire you. It's not that we give you a warning. It's not that we give you a caution. It's not that we give you suspension. We fire you. So do not go there. So there was a couple elections ago, there was a group of people, they were forwarding campaign slogans on their official government email, and that was the last they wrote. All four of them gone. So do not use your email for inappropriate purposes. If you receive something, that's fine, you read it, but just delete it, do not forward it. So this is somebody who's doing something, they're on American Idol, they're doing everything. Can they play part of this? The answer is no way, Ray. No, it's using, there's no legitimate use for forwarding stuff about that around. So can you send stuff about the local church bazaar? No, please do not do that. So that's not what that works on. Okay? Outside employment, moonlighting, you can do a little bit of that if you want. You can work your government job or work your second job, that's totally fine. You need to be careful about that. There's a few caveats on that. If you're in the military, there's some additional jobs you may or may not be able to do. You need to check with your supervisor about that. For example, when I was in the Air Force, we had a guy he was an Air Force pilot, and he was also a Bronco rider. And he wanted to ride, or excuse me, he's a bull rider. Bull rider, I'm sorry. And he wanted to be a bull rider. And the Air Force told him, no, you may not be a bull rider, because bull riders often get injured. And we didn't spend millions of dollars to train you as a pilot, and then have you get busted up every 3 months as a bull rider. So they would not let him be a bull rider. So you need to be careful about what you